Picture this: your boots crunching over moss-covered stones, the air thick with the scent of ancient earth, as you push through tangled vines to uncover a structure no living person has touched for centuries. This isn't just exploration, it's time travel, scattered across the most unforgiving corners of our planet, from jagged mountain peaks to deserts that stretch beyond the horizon, lie ruins so remote they defy logic. How did they get there? Who built them? And why do these silent, crumbling witnesses tell stories that clash with the history books? These aren't just forgotten relics, they're puzzles carved in stone, each one a piece of a global mystery about human movement. For generations, scholars traced migration routes with tidy arrows on maps, but these ruins whisper a different tale. They speak of journeys far earlier, paths far stranger, and cultures far more interconnected than we ever imagined. A temple perched on an island with no fresh water, a fortress buried in sand where no empire was supposed to reach. Every one of these 25 sites forces us to rewrite the narrative of how our ancestors crossed oceans, mountains, and continents. So let's set out together, not just to list ruins, but to decode their secrets. By the end of this journey, you'll see the past not as a static timeline, but as a web of bold voyages, lost technologies, and encounters that history forgot. Some of these places still don't appear on maps. Others were dismissed as myths until explorers stumbled upon their walls. What binds them all is this: they challenge us to rethink who we are, where we come from, and just how much courage it took to stand at the edge of the unknown and build something meant to last. Ready to have your mind stretched by the echoes of these lost builders? Let's begin. Deep in the emerald heart of Colombia's Sierra Nevada, where mist clings to the treetops and howler monkeys echo through the valleys, lies a secret older than the Inca Empire itself: Tayuna, the legendary lost city. Unlike Machu Picchu, which was abandoned just before the Spanish arrived, Tayuna had already been swallowed by the jungle for over 600 years by then. Built by the Tarona people around the year 800, this labyrinth of stone terraces and staircases wasn't just hidden, it was deliberately forgotten. The journey to reach it today is a 4-day trek through sweltering rivers and steep mountain passes, a test of endurance that mirrors the isolation its builders chose. Why would a civilization carve a city into such impossible terrain? The answer lies in the sophistication of the Tarona's understanding of their world. These weren't primitive people fleeing danger. They were master engineers who shaped the mountainside into terraces to prevent erosion, designed intricate water channels to harness rainfall, and positioned their sacred sites to align with celestial events. But the real mystery isn't just how they built it, it's who they traded with. Archaeologists have found seashells from the Caribbean and precious stones from the Amazon buried in Tayuna's ruins, proving the Tarona were part of a vast, interconnected network long before Europeans dreamed of crossing the Atlantic. This turns the old narrative of isolated pre-Columbian cultures on its head. These weren't scattered tribes, they were travelers, negotiators, and explorers who mapped routes through landscapes we still find treacherous today. And then, around the year 1600, Tayuna vanished, not from war or disaster, but by choice. The Tarona melted into the jungle, abandoning their stone masterpiece to protect their traditions from invaders. In doing so, they left behind something extraordinary, a time capsule of a migration story far more complex than textbooks ever described. The stones of Tayuna don't just whisper of a lost city, they shout a challenge to everything we thought we knew about ancient South America. Now let's cross the Atlantic to southern Africa, where the wind whistles through the towering granite walls of Great Zimbabwe, a ruin so monumental that early European explorers refused to believe Africans built it. These stone towers, some over 30 feet high, aren't just rubble. They're the skeleton of a kingdom that dominated trade routes from the 12th to the 15th century. And here's what's astonishing. Every stone was cut and stacked without mortar, each one precisely shaped to interlock with the next, a technique so advanced it survived 800 years of rain and wind. But the real story isn't just in the walls, it's in what archaeologists found buried beneath them. Fragments of Chinese porcelain, Persian glass, and even Indian beads tell a tale of a city connected to the wider world. This wasn't some isolated outpost. Great Zimbabwe was a bustling hub where gold from African mines changed hands for silks and spices from across the Indian Ocean. That shatters the old colonial myth that Africa was a passive bystander in global history. The scale of this place is humbling. At its peak, the city housed nearly 20,000 people, with a royal palace, a sprawling marketplace, and a massive stone tower that may have functioned as an ancient observatory. The layout itself is a clue buildings curve to follow the natural contours of the land, suggesting a deep harmony between the people and their environment. And then, around the year 1450, it was abandoned, not to war or invasion, but possibly to shifting trade routes or ecological change. What makes Great Zimbabwe so revolutionary isn't just its size, it's the way it forces us to rewrite history. For centuries, Western scholars attributed these ruins to Phoenicians or even the Queen of Sheba, unable to conceive that an African civilization could achieve such sophistication. But the truth is right there in the stones. This was a center of innovation, diplomacy, and wealth that stood toe-to-toe with the great medieval empires of Europe and Asia. The towers of Great Zimbabwe don't just mark a ruin, they mark a turning point in how we understand the past. Rising like stone sentinels from the Thessalian plains, the monasteries of Meteora defy gravity and explanation. These towering rock pillars, some reaching over 1,000 feet high, seem almost sculpted by divine hands, their flat summits crowned with medieval monasteries that cling to the cliffs like swallows' nests. Built between the 14th and 16th centuries, these sanctuaries weren't just places of worship, they were fortresses of faith, erected during an era when the Byzantine Empire crumbled under Ottoman invasion. But here's what baffles historians. How did monks haul timber, stone, and even fresco pigments up these vertical cliffs without modern tools? The answer lies in a mix of ingenuity and sheer audacity. Initially, builders used precarious removable ladders and ropes woven from willow branches, hauling materials in nets swung over dizzying drops. Later, they carved handholds and tunnels directly into the rock, turning the mountains themselves into tools. Some monasteries even had hidden windlasses, primitive winches operated by monks pulling from inside, lifting supplies basket by basket. But the real mystery isn't just how they built here, it's why. For hermits like Saint Athanasios, who founded the Great Meteoron in 1340, the isolation was spiritual armor. The higher the climb, the closer to God, the harsher the ascent, the purer the devotion. Yet there was also pragmatism in their seclusion. During the Ottoman conquest, these cliffs became natural strongholds. Hidden storerooms held years of food, and secret cisterns collected rainwater, allowing monks to survive sieges that would have toppled ground-level churches. The monasteries also tell a quieter story, one of cultural survival. Inside their frescoed chapels, artists blended Byzantine iconography with subtle influences from the West, preserving traditions that might have vanished under Ottoman rule. And the view from their windows, a strategic masterpiece. Monks could spot approaching armies for miles, their eagle's nest perches offering both spiritual elevation and literal defense. Today, only 6 of the original 24 monasteries remain active, but their legacy lingers in the whispers of wind through their rope baskets and the echo of chants against stone. Meteora isn't just a relic of the past, it's a testament to human tenacity where faith literally moved mountains. Now, let's journey from these sky-high sanctuaries to a site where the opposite happened, not reaching for the heavens but vanishing beneath the earth. In the jungles of Cambodia, a labyrinth of tunnels and temples lies hidden under centuries of roots and soil, the lost city of Mahendraparvata, older than Angkor Wat itself. Beneath the turquoise waves off Japan's westernmost island, Yonaguni, lies a puzzle that has divided scientists for decades, a series of massive, angular terraces and pillars that plunge 60 feet into the ocean depths. Some see the hand of nature in these formations, carved by centuries of relentless currents. Others point to the uncanny precision of the right angles, the stair-like steps, and the twin monoliths that resemble a giant's gateway, whispering of human hands at work. If these are indeed ruins, they're old, possibly dating back 8,000 years, to a time when sea levels were dramatically lower, and this site might have stood on dry land. What makes Yonaguni so controversial isn't just its appearance, it's the implications. If humans shaped these stones, it suggests a maritime culture advanced enough to navigate the treacherous Kuroshio Current, one of the strongest in the Pacific, long before historians believed such voyages were possible. The nearest known ancient civilization, the Jomon people of mainland Japan, were hunter-gatherers who left behind pottery but no evidence of monumental architecture. Could Yonaguni be the work of a lost seafaring society, one that mapped the Pacific's hidden pathways? Divers have found tantalizing clues, what looks like a carved relief of a turtle on one platform, circular depressions that might have held wooden posts, and even a straight, mile-long road stretching across the seabed. Skeptics argue these are just fractures in the sandstone, shaped by tectonic activity. But here's the twist: geologists admit the formations sit on a fault line, yet concede that nature rarely produces such symmetrical patterns. The debate boils down to this: either Yonaguni is the world's most astonishing geological coincidence, or it's a relic of a forgotten chapter in human migration, one where ancient mariners conquered distances we never thought possible. And then there's the folklore. Yonaguni's elders speak of a sunken city, a legend passed down for generations. Similar stories echo across the Pacific, from the submerged ruins of Nan Madol in Micronesia to the Maori tales of Hawaii, a homeland lost beneath the waves. Could these myths be distant memories of real events? If Yonaguni is artificial, it wouldn't just rewrite Japan's history, it would force us to reconsider how early humans explored the planet, not as cautious coast huggers but as bold navigators who ventured into the open ocean with nothing but the stars to guide them. The stones of Yonaguni, whether shaped by man or nature, challenge us to ask how much of our past is still hidden, waiting beneath the waves. Emerging from the Syrian desert like a mirage, the golden columns of Palmyra rise against an endless sea of sand, a testament to human ingenuity in one of Earth's most merciless landscapes. This wasn't just a city, it was a masterstroke of survival and diplomacy, built on an oasis so vital that caravans would detour hundreds of miles just to reach its life-giving waters. At its peak in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Palmyra wasn't merely a stop along the Silk Road. It was the hinge between East and West, where Roman senators rubbed shoulders with Persian merchants, and camel trains carried silk from China to the doorsteps of Rome. What makes Palmyra extraordinary isn't just its location, but its architecture, a fusion of styles that shouldn't exist according to old history books. Towering Roman Corinthian columns stand beside intricate Persian reliefs of winged lions, while inscriptions in Aramaic, Greek, and Latin crowd the same walls. This was no accident. Palmyrans weren't just passive middlemen, they were cultural alchemists blending traditions to create something entirely new. Take the Temple of Bel. Its outer design echoed Rome's grandeur, but inside, the altar faced north, a deliberate nod to Mesopotamian sun gods. Even their legal system was hybrid, mixing Roman property laws with Bedouin tribal customs. But Palmyra's true power lay in its people's ability to navigate empires. When Rome and Persia clashed, Palmyran diplomats brokered deals in both capitals, leveraging their neutrality to build a trading empire stretching from Spain to India. Queen Zenobia, the city's most famous ruler, didn't just resist Rome. She nearly toppled it, marching her armies as far as Egypt before her eventual defeat. Her ambition reveals a startling truth. This desert city wasn't some remote outpost. It was a rival to the superpowers of its day. Today, the ruins tell a darker story. Crumbling arches bear scars from recent conflict, a reminder of how quickly civilizations can fracture. Yet even in ruin, Palmyra challenges our assumptions. Those blended columns and bilingual inscriptions prove something revolutionary. Ancient peoples didn't live in isolated bubbles. They traded, borrowed, and adapted with a sophistication we're only beginning to appreciate. The sand may reclaim these stones, but their lesson endures. Borders were always more porous, and connections far deeper than our textbooks ever admitted. Now, let's shift from the sun-baked crossroads of Palmyra to a place where isolation wasn't a choice but a necessity, perched on cliffs so sheer that for centuries, no outsider even knew it existed. High in the Andes, the cloud-shrouded citadel of Chokwara waits, its terraces clinging to the mountainside like a stairway to the gods. Hidden beneath the fairy tale spires of Cappadocia's landscape lies a secret far more astonishing than its surface beauty, a labyrinth of underground cities so vast they could have sheltered entire populations for months. Carved into the soft volcanic rock known as tuff, these chambers aren't just simple caves. They're masterpieces of ancient engineering, with ventilation shafts plunging hundreds of feet to circulate fresh air, massive stone wheels to seal off tunnels from invaders, and even intricate systems for waste disposal. The largest of these, Derinkuyu, descends 18 levels deep, with space for 20,000 people plus their livestock, food stores, and places of worship. What's chilling isn't just the scale, it's the precision. These weren't temporary hideouts, they were designed for prolonged survival. Every detail reveals a society anticipating catastrophe. Wells tapped into underground aquifers to outlast sieges, communal kitchens with smoke channels disguised as natural fissures, and corridors so narrow that attackers could be picked off one by one. But who were they hiding from? The answer might lie in the layers of history. Cappadocia sat at the crossroads of empires, battered by waves of invaders from Hittites to Persians to early Christians fleeing Roman persecution. Each group likely expanded the tunnels, turning them into a subterranean mosaic of desperation and ingenuity. The real mystery, though, isn't just why they built down. It's how they coordinated such colossal projects without modern tools. The rock itself holds clues. Tuff is soft enough to carve with basic implements but hardens when exposed to air, creating sturdy walls. Yet even with ideal materials, the planning required is staggering. Ventilation shafts had to angle precisely to avoid detection while drawing air from hidden surface openings. Tunnels were deliberately uneven, with sudden drops and twists to disorient invaders. And the cities connected via miles of secret passages, suggesting a level of regional cooperation rarely seen in ancient times. Perhaps most haunting is what archaeologists haven't found: no evidence of panic, no hastily abandoned belongings. Just orderly rooms stocked with grinding stones, wine presses, and Christian frescoes hinting at quiet years spent waiting for daylight. Cappadocia's caves aren't just ruins, they're a manual on resilience, written in stone by people who knew the surface world wasn't always safe. Their legacy whispers a timeless warning. Civilization isn't about what we build in the light, it's what we're willing to protect in the dark. Now, let's leave these shadowed corridors for a place where isolation took the opposite form, not buried in rock but perched above the clouds. In Ethiopia's rugged Simien Mountains, the monks of Deba Domo wielded ropes and faith to create a sanctuary literally untouchable by the modern world. Stretching across the dusty plains of Myanmar like a forest of brick and gold, the temples of Bagan defy every expectation. Imagine standing on a sun-baked hillside, your gaze sweeping over not one or two, but 2,000 stupas and pagodas, their spires piercing the haze in every direction. This isn't just a sacred site, it's a phenomenon. Built between the 9th and 13th centuries, Bagan's temples cluster so densely that historians once assumed a mighty empire orchestrated their construction. But here's the twist, no empire could have marshaled such resources. Instead, Bagan's secret lies in the power of collective devotion, a groundswell of faith that rewrites how we understand Southeast Asia's past. Look closer at these structures, and you'll spot something astonishing. No two temples are exactly alike. Some rise in perfect symmetry, their brickwork echoing Indian influences. Others twist skyward in distinctly local styles, adorned with glazed tiles depicting scenes from Buddhist lore. This variety isn't random. It's the signature of a society where kings, merchants, and even farmers competed to leave their mark. Wealthy nobles funded grand temples like the Ananda, with its gilded towers visible for miles, but humble villagers built too, pooling resources for tiny shrines barely taller than a person. Together, they transformed this arid plain into a spiritual epicenter, drawing pilgrims from as far as Sri Lanka and Nepal. What truly baffles archaeologists isn't the scale, though, it's the logistics. Bagan sits in Myanmar's dry zone, where water is scarcer than gold. Yet builders dug thousands of wells and engineered intricate systems to trap monsoon rains. Even more puzzling, the bricks themselves. Tests reveal they were fired at temperatures impossibly high for the era, suggesting a lost technology or trade network supplying materials from distant kilns. And then there's the art. Murals inside the temples show scenes from everyday life: traders in Persian robes, musicians playing instruments from Bengal, dancers with poses straight from Java. This wasn't an isolated kingdom, it was a cultural crossroads humming with connections. The real revolution, though, lies in what Bagan tells us about migration. For centuries, scholars assumed Southeast Asia's great civilizations sprouted from Indian or Chinese influence, carried by conquerors or missionaries. But Bagan's temples tell a different story. Their architecture blends Indian designs with local ingenuity, while inscriptions reveal a people adapting Buddhism to their own worldview. This wasn't passive imitation, it was a dialogue, proof that ideas flowed both ways along ancient trade routes. Farmers who'd never left Myanmar could describe Sri Lankan temples because pilgrims brought back stories, creating a shared spiritual geography without mass movement of people. And then, around the 13th century, the building stopped, not from invasion or disaster, but perhaps because the fervor that fueled it simply faded. Earthquakes toppled some temples, others crumbled under neglect. Yet even in ruin, Bagan whispers a radical idea. Civilization doesn't always spread by sword or decree. Sometimes it grows from countless small acts of devotion, each brick laid not by a king's command, but by ordinary hands reaching for the divine. Standing among these temples today, you're not just seeing ruins, you're witnessing the quiet power of collective belief to reshape a landscape and a continent's history. Now, let's journey from this crowded plain to a place where isolation wasn't an accident, but a deliberate act of defiance perched on a cliff so sheer that even the wind hesitates to approach. In the highlands of Ethiopia, the rock-hewn churches of Lallibella rise like miracles from solid stone. Standing sentinel on the wind-scoured slopes of Rapa Nui, the Moai gaze inland with hollow eyes, silent witnesses to one of humanity's most audacious experiments in isolation. These towering figures, some weighing as much as 80 tons, weren't just carved from volcanic rock. They were hauled across miles of rugged terrain by a society with no metal tools, no wheels, and no large animals to help. Each statue's journey from quarry to coastline defies logic, a feat that would challenge modern engineers. But the real mystery isn't just how they moved them, it's why a people living on the most remote inhabited island on Earth devoted centuries to this monumental task. Rapa Nui's story begins with an ocean voyage so daring it borders on miraculous. Imagine setting sail in an outrigger canoe, navigating by stars and swells, with no guarantee of land beyond the horizon. Yet Polynesian explorers did just that, reaching this speck of land over 2,000 miles from the nearest continent around the year 1200. What they found was no paradise, just volcanic rock, thin soil, and a handful of seabirds, but they thrived, farming sweet potatoes in crater gardens and building a society so devoted to the Moai that clans competed to erect ever larger statues. These weren't mere decorations. Each Moai represented a deified ancestor, believed to channel spiritual power mana to protect the living. The statue's placement along the coast wasn't random. They faced inland to watch over villages, their backs to the sea, as if turning away from the impossible vastness that surrounded them. But the quarry at Rono-Raraku tells a darker tale. Hundreds of unfinished Moai lie there, some mid-carving, as if the artisans simply walked away. The answer to why lies in the island's fragile ecology. To move the Moai, Rapa Nui's people likely used a combination of log rollers and rope, a method that required vast amounts of timber. Over centuries, the island's palm forests vanished, leaving the soil to erode and crops to fail. Wars erupted over dwindling resources, toppled Moai bear scars from clan conflicts. By the time European ships arrived in 1722, the society had collapsed, its people reduced to a fraction of their peak numbers. Yet even in ruin, Rapa Nui holds lessons. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a microcosm of humanity's struggle to balance ambition with sustainability. The Moai's silence speaks volumes. They remind us that no society, no matter how ingenious, is immune to the limits of its environment. But they also testify to something extraordinary, the unshakable human drive to create meaning, to carve our stories in stone, even at the edge of the world. Carved into the rose-red cliffs of Jordan's arid highlands, Petra doesn't just emerge from the rock, it fools it. To walk the sick, that narrow gorge twisting like a serpent for over a mile, is to witness one of history's greatest illusions. The Nabateans didn't just build a city here, they weaponized the landscape itself, turning sheer canyon walls into both fortress and facade. By the time you glimpse the treasury's ornate columns glowing in the desert sun, you've already fallen for their masterstroke, a capital hidden in plain sight, its wealth guarded not by armies but by geography. What's staggering isn't just Petra's beauty, it's the audacity of its existence. This wasn't some oasis-fed paradise. The Nabateans chose this scorching, water-starved terrain precisely because it was hostile, positioning their city at the crossroads of spice and silk routes that stretched from China to Rome. Every drop of water was engineered, Channels carved into cliff faces funneled rainfall into hidden cisterns, while dams redirected flash floods that would have erased lesser cities. Their secret, a network of terracotta pipes so precise it could rival modern plumbing, delivering water to fountains, baths, and even rooftop gardens atop their tombs. But Petra's real power lay in its ambiguity. To passing caravans, it appeared as a mirage, a sudden burst of grandeur in the wilderness, where traders could rest, resupply, and pay tolls under the watchful eyes of Nabatean guards. The city's very design was psychological warfare. The treasury's facade, with its towering columns and mythical figures, wasn't just art. It was a billboard advertising Nabatean wealth and sophistication, convincing travelers this was a force too formidable to cheat. Meanwhile, hidden staircases and cliffside tunnels allowed goods and spies to move unseen. Then there's the mystery of their decline. Unlike cities ravaged by war, Petra faded slowly after Roman annexation in 106. New sea routes bypassed its overland trade, and earthquakes crippled its water systems. Yet the Nabateans had always been adapters, not conquerors. Their genius was in bending environments to their will. Perhaps their greatest lesson isn't in how they fell, but how they thrived for centuries in a place no one else dared claim. Petra's stones whisper a truth we're only now grasping. The desert wasn't a barrier to civilization. It was a canvas, and now let's turn from this sandstone masterpiece to a ruin that defies gravity itself, perched not in cliffs, but on the open sea. Off the coast of Tunisia, the sunken streets of Neapolis wait beneath the Mediterranean's waves, a ghostly reminder of nature's power to rewrite human geography. Far above the Arctic Circle, where glaciers carve their slow paths through endless tundra, the islands of Svalbard guard a secret that shouldn't exist: crumbling stone foundations and rusted iron nails scattered across the permafrost, remnants of Viking presence over 1,000 miles beyond what historians once considered the edge of their world. These aren't just accidental landings, they're evidence of deliberate, repeated voyages into some of the harshest conditions on Earth. The discovery of these Arctic ruins shatters the old map of Norse exploration, revealing sailors who didn't just brave the North Atlantic, they mastered it. What makes these ruins so startling isn't just their location, it's their timing. Carbon dating places them around the year 1200, centuries before European explorers like Barents would discover Svalbard in 1596. The structures themselves are classic Norse: low stone walls designed to withstand polar winds, fire pits lined with whalebone for insulation, and even fragments of wooden sledges that hint at winter expeditions across frozen seas. But why would Vikings push this far north, where winter brings 24 hours of darkness and temperatures that freeze steel? The answer lies in something far more valuable than land: walrus ivory. At the height of the medieval period, ivory was Europe's white gold, coveted for religious carvings, chess pieces, and luxury goods. Norse sagas speak of Nordasetter, mysterious hunting grounds where crews risked their lives for tusks. Svalbard's ruins suggest this wasn't just legend, it was big business. Imagine crews spending months on these barren shores, harvesting walruses by the hundreds, their ships' hulls packed with ivory that would fund entire chieftains' estates back in Norway. This wasn't aimless exploration, it was a calculated industry, one that required precise navigation through pack ice and knowledge of Arctic currents we still struggle with today. Yet the real revelation isn't just economic, it's biological. Excavations uncovered something unexpected: the bones of Greenlandic dogs buried alongside human remains, proving the Norse didn't just survive here, they adapted. These weren't the same breeds used in Scandinavia. They were larger, hardier animals, likely traded or captured from indigenous Thule people in Greenland. That single detail rewrites two histories at once. It shows Norse contact with Arctic indigenous groups was far more extensive than recorded, and it reveals a people willing to learn from those who knew the land best. The silence of Svalbard's ruins speaks volumes. No battle scars, no signs of sudden abandonment, just orderly campsites slowly reclaimed by frost. This suggests the Norse didn't flee the Arctic. They left when the ivory trade shifted, their ships following the money south as crusades opened new routes to African and Asian goods. But their legacy lingers in the ice. Every weathered stone and rusted nail forces us to confront a truth we've long resisted. The medieval Arctic wasn't an empty wasteland. It was a highway, a marketplace, and a proving ground for some of history's most underestimated explorers. The Vikings didn't just reach Svalbard, they turned the top of the world into another chapter of their saga. Emerging from the tangled embrace of Guatemala's Patane rainforest, the pyramids of El Mirador loom like sleeping giants, monuments so vast they make nearby Tikal seem modest by comparison. This isn't just another Mayan city, it's a time capsule from the preclassic era, 1,000 years older than the iconic sites tourists flock to today. What's staggering isn't just the age of these structures, but their sheer ambition. The crown jewel, La Danta, rises 230 feet from the jungle floor, its base sprawling across 18 acres, a footprint larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. And it wasn't alone. Dozens of temples and causeways radiate outward, hinting at a metropolis that thrived when Rome was still a backwater village. But here's what flips the script on everything we thought we knew about the Maya. El Mirador wasn't some isolated ceremonial center. The surrounding jungle hides hundreds of smaller settlements linked by raised stone highways, some stretching 20 miles through swamps and hills. These Sakbiob weren't just paths, they were the arteries of a sprawling civilization, proof that the Maya forged connections across distances historians once deemed impossible for the era. The old theory of scattered, warring city-states collapses here. At its peak around 200 BCE, this region may have housed over 1 million people, a density rivaling ancient China or Mesopotamia. The real mystery lies in how they sustained such numbers. Unlike the Nile or Indus Valley, the Patane lacks major rivers, yet LiDAR scans reveal something extraordinary. A lattice of canals and reservoirs so precise, they turned seasonal downpours into a reliable water source. Even more ingenious, the Maya enriched their thin tropical soil with a charcoal-based fertilizer called terra preta, creating farmlands productive enough to feed armies of laborers. This wasn't just survival, it was ecological engineering on a scale we're only beginning to comprehend. Then, around the year 150 CE, El Mirador's lights went out. No invasion, no quake, just a gradual exodus as overpopulation and deforestation likely triggered collapse. But the jungle didn't erase their legacy, it preserved it. While later Mayan cities like Chichen Itza rose and fell, El Mirador's ruins slumbered undisturbed, their very isolation safeguarding clues to a forgotten chapter. Those vine-draped pyramids don't just mark a city, they're a blueprint for how civilizations can flourish against impossible odds, and a warning etched in stone about the delicate balance between ambition and sustainability. Now, let's journey from this overgrown metropolis to a ruin that embodies the opposite extreme, not hidden by trees, but by sheer, unyielding rock. In the high deserts of Turkey, the cave city of Derinkuyu plunges 18 levels underground, a labyrinth where entire communities vanished beneath the earth. Beneath the waves off India's western coast, where the Arabian Sea churns with monsoon currents, lies a mystery that blurs the line between myth and history. The ancient city of Dwarka, described in sacred Hindu texts as a glittering kingdom of gold and marble, was said to have vanished beneath the ocean in a single cataclysmic event. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as legend until marine archaeologists began pulling stones from the seabed. What they've uncovered isn't just proof of a lost city. It's a window into how climate change reshaped human civilization long before the modern era. The Mahabharata, an epic dating back over 2,000 years, paints Dwarka as the domain of Lord Krishna, its streets lined with palaces and its harbors bustling with ships from distant lands. When Krishna departed the earth, the texts claim, the sea swallowed his city whole. Fast forward to the 1980s, when divers near present-day Dwarka discovered massive stone blocks, some weighing over half a ton, arranged in geometric patterns unmistakably shaped by human hands. Further excavations revealed pottery shards, anchors, and even a submerged jetty, all lying 30 to 40 feet underwater. Carbon dating places these artifacts around 1500 BCE, a time when global sea levels were rising dramatically as the last ice age glaciers melted. Here's where the science gets haunting. The ruins aren't scattered randomly, they follow the outline of a planned city, with clusters of structures suggesting residential areas, temples, and fortifications. One particularly striking find is a stone slab engraved with a three-headed animal motif, echoing descriptions of Dwarka's gates in ancient texts, but the real revelation lies in the geology. Core samples from the seabed show layers of sand and shell abruptly interrupted by gravel and building debris, a textbook signature of a sudden inundation. This wasn't gradual erosion, it was a tsunami or rapid subsidence, exactly as the legends describe. What makes Dwarka revolutionary isn't just its confirmation of myth, it's the implications for our understanding of migration. The city's location on India's western edge was no accident. Archaeologists now believe it was part of a network of coastal settlements that traded with Mesopotamia, the Persian Gulf, and even East Africa. When rising seas claimed Dwarka, its people likely didn't vanish. They dispersed, carrying their culture inland or along new trade routes. Similar submerged ruins have been found off Japan, Indonesia, and the Baltic, hinting at a global pattern of climate-driven displacement we're only beginning to map. The stones of Dwarka whisper a warning across millennia. They remind us that rising waters aren't just a future threat, they've reshaped human destiny before. And they challenge us to ask, how many other cities, how many other stories lie hidden beneath the waves waiting to rewrite our past? Perched on the windswept plains of central Turkey, the ruins of Hatusa don't just whisper, they shout in stone and clay. This was no ordinary city, encircled by walls so thick 3 chariots could ride abreast atop them. The Hittite capital was a marvel of Bronze Age engineering, a fortress so formidable it dominated Anatolia for centuries. Yet walk its silent streets today and you'll find something eerie, a metropolis meticulously abandoned. No evidence of sackings, no mass graves, just empty granaries, neatly stacked tablets, and gates left unbarred. The vanishing of the Hittites isn't just a mystery, it's a masterclass in how empires can evaporate overnight. What makes Hatusa unforgettable isn't just its scale, it's the paper trail they left behind. Over 30,000 cuneiform tablets survive in the ruins, many detailing treaties, laws, and even diplomatic correspondence with rivals like Egypt. One letter, addressed to Pharaoh Ramses II after the Battle of Kadesh, reads like ancient geopolitical chess, blending threats with offers of mutual aid. These weren't isolated barbarians. They were sophisticated administrators who pioneered constitutional monarchy and international diplomacy. Their sudden disappearance around 1200 BCE becomes even stranger when you realize they saw the collapse coming. Tablets mention food shortages, refugee waves, and enemies from the sea, likely the shadowy sea peoples ravaging the Mediterranean. But here's the twist. Hatusa's downfall wasn't just about invaders. Core samples from nearby lakes reveal something darker, a 300-year drought that turned fertile plains to dust. The Hittites relied on a delicate balance of rain-fed agriculture and tribute from vassal states. When both failed simultaneously, the empire's intricate bureaucracy became its Achilles heel. Unlike nomadic groups that could migrate, Hatusa's population was tethered to grain stores and centralized authority. As supplies dwindled, orderly evacuation may have been their only option. The tablets hint at this. One records the king commanding regional governors to open the storehouses to all citizens, a possible last act of redistribution before abandonment. Yet the most haunting clue lies in what they didn't take. In the temple district, archaeologists found statues of gods deliberately buried face down, an act of ritual closure, not panic. This suggests the Hittites didn't flee, they left, methodically dismantling their power even as they preserved its memory. Their legacy lived on in surprising ways. Nearby Iron Age kingdoms like the Phrygians recycled Hatusa's stones but adopted Hittite legal codes, proving cultural DNA outlasts empires. Standing in Hatusa's Lion Gate today, you're not just seeing ruins. You're witnessing the birth of a historical whodunit, one where climate, migration, and human resilience collide. The stones ask us, when collapse comes, is disappearance failure or strategy? The Hittites may have vanished, but their whispers in clay refuse to be forgotten. High in the Peruvian Andes, where condors ride thermals above plunging ravines, the ruins of Chokwara cling to a ridge so steep it seems to defy gravity. This isn't just another Incan site, it's a mirror to Machu Picchu, with terraces cascading down mountainsides and temples aligned to catch the first light of dawn. Yet, unlike its famous sibling, Chokwara remains nearly untouched by modern crowds. Reaching it demands a grueling 4-day trek across swinging rope bridges and vertigo-inducing cliffs, a journey so arduous that fewer than 10 visitors arrive each day. But the real question isn't why so few come, it's why the Inca built here at all. The answer lies in the stones themselves. Chokwara's terraces aren't just agricultural, they're celestial. Follow their lines upward, and you'll discover something extraordinary. An entire section of the complex is dedicated to the constellations. White quartz llamas, each over 6 feet long, are embedded in the dark stone of the ceremonial plaza, forming a mirror image of the Milky Way as it appears during the winter solstice. For the Inca, this wasn't just decoration, it was sacred cartography, a way of anchoring the heavens to the earth. The site's very name hints at this purpose. Chokwara means cradle of gold in Quechua, but scholars now believe it might also reference the golden tether, a concept linking the physical and spiritual worlds. But the ingenuity doesn't stop there. Chokwara's location, perched above the Apurimac River, one of the most sacred waterways in Incan cosmology, was no accident. The river's thunderous roar far below would have been interpreted as the voice of Pachamama, the Earth Mother, while the site's elevation placed it literally and symbolically closer to Intai, the sun god. Even the terraces serve dual purposes. Their perfect drainage prevents erosion, yes, but their staggered design also creates microclimates, allowing crops from different ecological zones to grow side by side. This wasn't just farming, it was alchemy, a blending of the highland and jungle realms the Inca sought to unite. The most haunting clue, though, lies in what's missing. Unlike Machu Picchu, Chokwara shows no signs of sudden abandonment. Instead, its artifacts, ceremonial knives, weaving tools, even children's toys, were carefully placed in storage niches as if awaiting a return. Spanish chronicles mention rumors of a second Vilcabamba, a hidden refuge where Inca nobles fled after the conquest. Could Chokwara have been their last stronghold? The evidence is tantalizing. A sealed tunnel discovered in 2019 leads deep into the mountain, its purpose still unknown. Chokwara's isolation then wasn't an obstacle, it was the point. In a world where geography was theology, building here wasn't just practical, it was an act of devotion. Every stone whispers a truth the Inca knew well. Some places aren't meant to be easy to reach. They're meant to remind us that the sacred isn't found on the well-trodden path, but where the earth meets the sky, and the past waits patiently for those willing to climb. The wind howls through empty doorways in Chokwara, carrying grains of sand that whisper secrets no living soul can confirm. This ghost village in Rajasthan's Thar desert isn't just abandoned, it feels forsaken. Over 400 stone houses stand frozen in time, their walls scarred by centuries of scorching sun, their courtyards silent but for the skittering of desert foxes. Local legends claim the entire population vanished overnight in 1825, fleeing a tyrannical tax collector who coveted the village's wealthy Brahmin daughters. As the story goes, the elders placed a curse on the land before their exodus, ensuring no one could ever settle there again. To this day, Rajasthan's nomadic shepherds refuse to enter Chokwara after dark, swearing they've heard the clink of invisible gold coins and the muffled sobs of women in the ruins. But peel back the layers of folklore, and you'll find something far more unsettling than ghosts. Archaeologists studying the village wells have uncovered a grim truth: the water turned saline. Core samples reveal that around the time of Chokwara's abandonment, the nearby Gaga River, once lifeblood to this arid region, began drying up due to shifting monsoon patterns. Without fresh water, the Palawul Brahmins who built these elegant sandstone homes faced an impossible choice: stay and perish, or join the caravans crossing the desert in search of new beginnings. Their decision echoes a pattern seen across history, from the Anasazi cliff dwellings to Syria's abandoned cities. When the water vanishes, so do the people. What makes Chokwara extraordinary isn't just its emptiness, but its completeness. Unlike ruins ravaged by war or natural disaster, these homes were left intact. Wooden looms still stand in corners, grinding stones rest near hearths, and faded murals of peacocks adorn interior walls. This wasn't panic, it was a planned retreat. Tax records from the era show the Palawuls were renowned accountants and jewelers, their wealth built on trade routes linking Rajasthan to Persia. When the environmental crisis hit, they likely leveraged those very connections to relocate en masse, their skills ensuring welcome in distant courts. The curse, perhaps just a brilliant deterrent, a story spun to keep looters away until they could return, a return that never came. Standing in Chokwara's dust-choked streets, you're not just seeing a ghost town. You're witnessing humanity's oldest survival strategy, the ability to walk away when the land can no longer sustain a dream. The stones here hold no malice, only a warning. Civilizations don't always fall to swords or earthquakes. Sometimes they're undone by something as quiet as a disappearing drop of water. Standing like sentinels in the endless sea of sand, the crumbling watchtowers of the Gobi Desert tell a story of empire, endurance, and the invisible threads that once bound continents together. These aren't just piles of sun-bleached bricks, they're the skeleton of a vast security network built by the Tang dynasty around the 7th century, stretching over 1,000 miles along the Silk Road's most treacherous stretch. Each tower was placed with military precision, spaced exactly 1 day's march apart, their flickering signal fires forming a communication chain that could relay messages from Dunhuang to Beijing in mere days. But what's truly astonishing isn't their scale, it's how they transformed isolation into power. Climb the creaking wooden stairs of one of these towers today, and you'll spot something genius about their placement. They don't crown the highest dunes or hug the easiest paths. Instead, they perch on low rises near hidden water sources, forcing caravans to pass within arrow range. This was psychological warfare. The towers weren't just lookouts, they were billboards announcing imperial control. Merchants knew that to stray from the route meant risking bandits, while staying on it meant paying tolls. The Tang didn't conquer the go-by, they weaponized its emptiness. Yet these towers weren't just tools of domination. Excavations at their bases reveal fragments of Sogdian pottery, Tibetan prayer beads, and even Roman glass evidence that they doubled as unofficial trading posts. Guards bartered for news along with goods, creating an intelligence network as sophisticated as any modern embassy. A scrap of paper found in one tower's ruins records a conversation between a Tang soldier and a Aigha trader debating the price of camels, proving these weren't hostile checkpoints but cultural crossroads. The real mystery lies in their abandonment. Unlike forts destroyed in war, these towers were simply left to the sand. Tree rings from surviving support beams point to the answer: a 70-year mega-drought in the 9th century that turned the Silk Road into a dust-choked graveyard. With no caravans to protect, the towers lost their purpose overnight, but their legacy lives on in an unexpected place: the Great Wall itself. The Ming dynasty later copied their spacing and signaling techniques, proving that even in ruin, these desert sentinels taught empires how to tame the wild edges of the world. Now the wind scours their bricks smooth, erasing inscriptions and toppling walls. Yet their shadows still trace perfect lines across the sand at noon, like sundials marking the passage of an age when dust and diplomacy moved at the same deliberate pace. The go-by's towers remind us that borders aren't just lines on maps, they're conversations written in stone and fire, negotiations between civilization and the wild that never truly end. While Angkor Wat draws millions of visitors to its iconic spires, just 40 miles east lies a ruin so consumed by jungle it feels like stepping into an explorer's sketchbook from the 1800s Beng Melia. This sprawling temple complex hasn't been cleared for tourists. Instead, nature holds full dominion here, with strangler figs bursting through sandstone galleries and vines draping over collapsed corridors like cobwebs. Walking its ruins requires scrambling over fallen lintels and ducking under tree roots that have literally stitched the stones back into the earth. Yet this isn't neglect, it's a clue. Beng Melia's wild state preserves something extraordinary: the blueprint of how the Khmer Empire wove its civilization into the landscape itself. The scale is the first shock. While smaller than Angkor Wat, Beng Melia's footprint rivals a medieval cathedral with a central tower, libraries, and concentric galleries that mirror its famous cousin's design. But here's what changes everything. Archaeologists using LiDAR have discovered Beng Melia sits at the center of a vast web of roads and canals, linking it to over 20 smaller temples. This wasn't some isolated outpost, it was a hub, one node in a carefully engineered network stretching across hundreds of square miles. The Khmer didn't just build monuments, they terraformed entire regions. What's revolutionary about these lesser-known ruins is how they challenge the old idea of Angkor as a solitary jewel in the wilderness. Beng Melia's sophisticated hydraulics, its moats and reservoirs still holding water after 8 centuries, prove it was self-sustaining. Nearby, the even more remote Chokwara complex features a 7-tiered pyramid taller than anything at Angkor, suggesting rival power centers flourishing simultaneously. This paints a new picture of the Khmer Empire, not a centralized kingdom, but a dynamic ecosystem of urban centers, each adapting to local resources while sharing a common architectural language. The real mystery lies in the logistics. How did a society without pack animals or wheeled carts coordinate such colossal projects across dense rainforest? The answer might be in the canals, Recent excavations reveal Bengmelia's waterways align with celestial events, doubling as both irrigation and ceremonial pathways. During the monsoon, these channels would have transformed into liquid highways, floating quarried sandstone from distant mountains straight to construction sites. It's a staggering feat of engineering, one that turned the jungle from an obstacle into a partner. Yet the most haunting detail isn't in the stones but the trees. At Top Romkel, a satellite temple near Bengmelia, archaeologists found something peculiar: centuries-old chisel marks on towering silk cotton trees. These weren't accidental. The Khmer deliberately nurtured certain trees as living pillars, integrating them into sacred geometry. This wasn't civilization battling nature, it was a dialogue. When the empire eventually retreated in the 15th century, the jungle didn't reclaim these sites so much as welcome them back. Bengmelia's ruins whisper a radical idea. Maybe the collapse of Angkor wasn't collapse at all. Perhaps it was a strategic withdrawal, a return to older, more sustainable ways of living with the land. As modern Cambodia grapples with deforestation, these overgrown stones offer more than history. They hold lessons in resilience written in root and rock. Beneath Antarctica's 2-mile thick ice sheets, where temperatures plunge to -100 degrees and winds howl at hurricane force, satellite images have revealed something that shouldn't exist: geometric shapes too precise to dismiss as mere tricks of glacial erosion. These alleged ruins, buried under millennia of snow, ignite one of archaeology's fiercest debates. Could humans have thrived on this frozen continent long before modern history claims? The implications are staggering. If verified, these structures wouldn't just rewrite migration maps, they'd shatter our understanding of how early cultures adapted to Earth's most extreme environments. The controversy stems from anomalies spotted by ground-penetrating radar near the continent's lesser explored eastern regions. What appear to be symmetrical walls and what might even be the outline of a massive, oval structure have sparked theories ranging from the plausible to the fantastical. Mainstream scientists urge caution, pointing out that wind-scoured bedrock can mimic artificial shapes. But here's where it gets intriguing: geological surveys confirm Antarctica wasn't always an icy wasteland. Fossilized ferns and petrified wood prove that 50 million years ago, this land hosted rainforests, and as recently as 4,000 years ago, during a warm period known as the Holocene climatic optimum, parts of the coastal shelves may have been ice-free. Could ancient seafarers have glimpsed or even settled these fleeting habitable zones? Clues might lie in the unlikeliest of places: medieval European maps. The infamous Piri Reis chart, drawn in 1513, shows Antarctica's coastline with eerie accuracy centuries before its official discovery. While some dismiss this as coincidence, others note the map's annotations describe sourcing from ancient Alexander-era documents. Even more compelling are oral traditions from the Maori and Polynesian navigators, whose legends speak of a far southern land their ancestors may have visited. These aren't just campfire tales. Polynesian voyagers routinely crossed thousands of miles of open ocean in outrigger canoes, reaching remote islands like Rapa Nui. If they could navigate such distances, why not probe southward during warmer epochs? The technological hurdles, however, are immense. Building permanent structures in Antarctica, even during a warm spell, would have required resources and knowledge far beyond what we attribute to ancient cultures. Yet consider this: the Inca built Machu Picchu at 12,000 feet. The Norse survived Greenland's Little Ice Age, and the ancestral Puebloans cultivated crops in the arid southwest. Human ingenuity consistently defies environmental limits. Perhaps Antarctica's hypothetical builders weren't year-round residents but seasonal visitors, drawn by rich marine resources or even sacred significance, leaving behind stone markers now entombed in ice. Until direct exploration becomes possible, the truth remains frozen in time. But the mere possibility forces us to confront a humbling idea. Our species' history may be far older, far stranger, and far more resilient than we ever imagined. Antarctica's silent ruins, real or not, challenge us to ask what other chapters of human courage and curiosity lie buried beneath the ice, waiting for the thaw. Rising from the Baltic Sea like a stone crown, the fortress of Suomenlinna sprawls across 6 windswept islands just off Helsinki's coast. But don't let its proximity to Finland's modern capital fool you. When Sweden broke ground here in 1748, this was the edge of the known world. The island's jagged cliffs and frozen waters made them the perfect canvas for one of Europe's most audacious military experiments. A naval stronghold so remote, so meticulously designed, it could control an entire sea lane without needing a standing army. The fortress's very existence forces us to rethink how empires wielded power in an age when distance was measured in months, not miles. What's astonishing isn't just Suomenlinna's scale, it's the precision of its isolation. Sweden didn't just build on these islands, it reshaped them. Workers blasted channels to turn separate outcrops into interlocking defensive zones, while hidden dry docks allowed warships to be repaired in secret. The fortress's star-shaped bastions weren't placed haphazardly. Each angle was calculated to create overlapping fields of fire, ensuring any approaching fleet would face a gauntlet of cannon fire long before reaching the inner harbor. Yet the real genius lay underground. A labyrinth of tunnels connected gunpowder magazines and barracks, allowing defenders to move unseen while attackers floundered in the open. This wasn't just a wall in the sea, it was a 3-dimensional chessboard where geography became strategy. But why here? The answer lies in a map of 18th century power struggles. Sweden's empire stretched across the Baltic, and controlling these waters meant controlling trade routes that fed half of Europe. Suomenlinna's location was no accident. It guarded the narrowest point before the Gulf of Finland, a chokehold where passing ships couldn't avoid its guns. Yet the fortress also reveals a paradox of imperial ambition. The further power stretched, the more fragile it became. Maintaining this remote outpost demanded staggering resources. Icebreakers had to keep supply lines open through brutal winters, while garrisons endured months of isolation. When Russia finally seized Suomenlinna in 1808, it wasn't through brute force, they simply bypassed it, landing troops further up the coast. The fortress's fate proves a timeless lesson. Even the mightiest stronghold is only as strong as the empire that sustains it. Today, Suomenlinna's ramparts tell quieter stories. The same tunnels that once echoed with marching soldiers now house artist studios, their thick stone walls insulating against the Baltic winds. UNESCO-listed buildings that once stored cannonballs host cafes where visitors sip coffee overlooking the same horizon Swedish sentries watched for Russian sails. This transformation holds a deeper truth: what empires build for war, time often turns toward peace. The fortress's enduring legacy isn't its faded military might, but its stubborn refusal to vanish. As ferries weave between its islands, they trace the same routes once patrolled by warships, a reminder that even the most remote outposts are never truly forgotten. They simply wait for new chapters to unfold. Deep in the Amazon's uncharted wilderness, where modern satellite maps still show blank spaces, a series of nearly vertical cliffs hide something extraordinary, cave paintings so vivid they look freshly painted, yet they tell stories from a world 12,000 years gone. These aren't crude handprints or simple stick figures. Stretching across cavern walls in Brazil's Serra do Capivara and Colombia's Caribequite National Park are intricate murals of towering mastodons, giant sloths, and other Ice Age giants, their outlines pulsing with red ochre as if the artists had just stepped away. This art does more than dazzle, it rewrites the narrative of how and when humans penetrated the Amazon's deepest reaches, turning what was once considered an impenetrable green desert into a corridor for ancient explorers. What makes these sites revolutionary isn't just their age, it's their location. Many lie behind cascading waterfalls or atop mesas accessible only by free climbing 100-foot rock faces. This wasn't casual doodling, it was ritual. The painters chose these perilous perches deliberately, turning caves into sanctuaries where the act of creation itself may have been sacred. Some chambers show evidence of repeated visits across millennia, with layers of pigments suggesting generations returned to retrace and renew the images. The most haunting panels depict not just animals, but human figures with elongated limbs and geometric headdresses, their poses frozen in what might be dances or ceremonies. Were these caves archives, temples, or both? The real bombshell lies in the dating. While mainstream archaeology long held that humans only entered the Amazon around 5,000 years ago, thermoluminescence testing on mineral deposits covering some paintings pushes their age back to at least 11,000 years, contemporary with the Clovis culture of North America. Even more startling are the extinct species depicted with anatomical accuracy: saber-toothed cats with their distinctive fangs, glyptodonts with domed shells. These artists didn't imagine these creatures, they knew them, implying coexistence during the Pleistocene. That timeline suggests early migrants didn't creep slowly down the coasts. They may have followed now vanished rivers deep into the rainforest, adapting with a speed we're only beginning to comprehend. But the most tantalizing clues come from the paint itself. Spectrographic analysis reveals pigments mixed with plant resins that still repel insects today, a sophistication we never attributed to primitive hunter-gatherers. Some reds contain cinnabar traded from the Andes, while blacks derived from manganese nodules carried hundreds of miles. This wasn't survival, it was networking. The cave's remoteness now seems like a red herring. Their creators were likely part of a vast cultural web, exchanging materials and ideas across a continent we're only now realizing was connected far earlier than presumed. As vines slowly reclaim these painted walls, they guard a revelation. The Amazon wasn't an obstacle to early humans. It was a canvas. Every stroke of ochre whispers that our ancestors didn't just endure this environment, they honored it, chronicling their journey in pigments that outlasted empires. And high above the forest floor, where the humidity hasn't faded the colors, the animals still run, the dancers still whirl, keeping alive a migration story written in light and shadow. Beneath the sun-baked plains of Cappadocia, where fairy chimneys dot the landscape like something from a dream, lies a nightmare-turned sanctuary, the sprawling underground city of Derinkuyu. This isn't just a cluster of caves, it's an 18-level deep metropolis carved with such precision that it could shelter 20,000 people for months on end. Picture this: entire families, their livestock, even their places of worship, all hidden beneath the earth, safe from whatever chaos raged above. The scale is staggering. Ventilation shafts plunge nearly 200 feet, delivering fresh air even to the lowest chambers, while massive circular stone doors, each weighing up to half a ton, could roll into place to seal off entire sections from invaders. What's chilling isn't just the engineering, it's the psychology behind it. Derinkuyu's builders didn't just dig for shelter, they planned for siege. Hidden passageways twist unexpectedly, some so narrow they force intruders to crawl single file, turning every corridor into a potential kill zone. Wine presses and oil mills buried deep in the rock suggest stockpiles for long-term survival, while cruciform churches carved into the bedrock reveal a people determined to preserve their faith even in darkness. The city's layout reads like a manual for desperation: stables on upper levels to mask the scent of humans below, communal kitchens with smoke channels disguised as natural fissures, and even a subterranean river tapped for fresh water. But why go to such extremes? The answer may lie in Cappadocia's violent history. Wedged between warring empires, Romans, Persians, Arabs, this region was a battleground for centuries. Early Christians fleeing Roman persecution likely expanded existing Hittite tunnels, turning them into a labyrinth of last resort. Later, during Arab-Byzantine clashes, the tunnels became a refuge for entire communities. Yet there's another, darker possibility: climate catastrophe. Tree ring data from the era reveals prolonged droughts that would have made the surface world uninhabitable. Durinkuyu's inhabitants may have been hiding not just from armies but from the sky itself. The true marvel, though, lies in the coordination. Unlike haphazard bunkers, Durinkuyu connects via miles of tunnels to other underground cities like Kamakli, suggesting a regional network of subterranean safe havens. How did ancient people without blueprints or modern tools orchestrate such a feat? The volcanic tuff rock holds the secret: soft enough to carve with simple tools, yet hardening when exposed to air. But even with ideal materials, the logistics boggle the mind. Ventilation shafts had to angle precisely to avoid detection while drawing air from hidden surface vents. Builders calculated load-bearing walls to prevent collapses across multiple levels, and marked safe routes with subtle indentations only initiates would recognize. Today, Durinkuyu's silence is its most haunting feature. No scattered bones or signs of panic, just orderly rooms with grinding stones still perched in corners, as if waiting for hands that never returned. This wasn't a tomb, it was a time capsule, abandoned when the surface world became livable again. Its legacy whispers a timeless truth: civilization isn't defined by what we build in the light, but by what we're willing to protect in the dark. And in Durinkuyu's shadowed halls, you can still feel the collective breath of thousands, holding on until the world above was safe once more. Now, let's leave these depths for a ruin that takes isolation to the opposite extreme, not beneath the earth but suspended above it. In the jagged peaks of Ethiopia's Simien Mountains, the monks of Deba Domo built a sanctuary so inaccessible, it defied not just invaders but gravity itself. Rusting iron bones of industry jut from the black sand beaches of South Georgia like the carcass of some mechanical leviathan. These aren't just ruins, they're the ghostly aftermath of a blood and oil frenzy that dragged civilization to the very edge of the habitable world. The whaling stations of Grytviken and Stromness, huddled against Antarctic winds that scream at 80 miles per hour, weren't built for glory or conquest. They were factories of pure necessity, where steam-powered ships disgorged mountains of blubber onto flensing platforms slick with gore, all to feed the world's insatiable hunger for lamp oil, corset stays, and margarine. What's staggering isn't just the brutality, it's the precision. These stations operated with chilling efficiency in conditions that would paralyze modern machinery. Workers in woolens and whale gut waterproofs rendered down 40-ton blue whales in shifts that lasted 18 hours, their hands numbed by temperatures that froze steel tools to skin. The station's layout reveals a macabre genius: railway tracks for moving carcasses, towering iron digesters that boiled blubber into oil, even makeshift hospitals where surgeons amputated frostbitten limbs between whale cuttings. This wasn't just industry, it was a high-stakes alchemy, turning living giants into commodities, all while icebergs drifted past the harbor mouths. yet these ruins whisper a paradox. The same isolation that made South Georgia a perfect killing ground, no prying eyes, no regulations, also birthed one of history's strangest microcultures. Norwegian managers, Scottish engineers, and Caribbean harpooners formed a polyglot society where wages were paid in whiskey and the local currency was sealskin. In Grytviken's crumbling cinema, men watched Charlie Chaplin reels between storms, while the station cemetery holds both whalers and the legendary explorer Ernest Shackleton, whose epic survival story unfolded just miles from these blubber-stained shores. The stations became accidental waypoints for Antarctic expeditions, their radios crackling with distress calls from doomed ships like the Endurance. Now the wind has won. Peeling paint curls from warehouse walls in colors once bright enough to guide ships through fog blood red, sulfuric yellow. Rust has swallowed the great trypots where blubber bubbled, and elephant seals sprawl across the ruins, their belches echoing where steam whistles once screamed. The stations stand as grim meter sticks for ecological change. In their heyday, over 1.5 million whales were processed here. Today, humpbacks breach playfully past abandoned docks, their populations slowly recovering since the 1966 moratorium. South Georgia's ruins don't ask for reverence. They're monuments to humanity's reckless talent for reaching too far, taking too much, then leaving the scars to weather under polar skies. But in their decay lies an unexpected hope, proof that even the most ravaged places can heal when given the chance. The whales have returned, the ice endures. And the stations, they're just skeletons now, slowly being reclaimed by the silence they once shattered. Beneath the turquoise waters of Abaukia Bay, where Mediterranean currents swirl over forgotten streets, lies a city so legendary even historians doubted its existence, Heraclion. Not just any port, but the grand gateway where Greek merchants once rubbed shoulders with Egyptian priests, where Cleopatra herself may have walked. For over 1,000 years, this vanished metropolis lived only in scattered texts and whispered tales until one stormy night in 1996, when a French archaeologist's dredge scraped against something that shouldn't have been there, a colossal stone face, its features worn smooth by centuries of tides, staring up from the seabed as if waking from a dream. What emerged from the silt was nothing short of a time capsule. Giant statues of pharaohs and gods stood frozen in silent procession, their hieroglyphs still crisp beneath marine growth. Gold coins minted in Athens nestled beside Egyptian amulets, while shipwrecks, some still laden with bronze vessels and papyrus scrolls, revealed cargoes that spanned the ancient world. But the real revelation wasn't the artifacts themselves, it was their dates. Carbon testing placed Heraclion's peak at least 2 centuries earlier than scholars believed such intensive Greco-Egyptian trade existed. This wasn't just a trading post, it was the linchpin of a Mediterranean network far older and far more interconnected than we ever imagined. Dive deeper into the ruins and the city's genius reveals itself. Heraclion didn't merely sit at the crossroads of cultures, it engineered them. A series of colossal stone steels, inscribed in both Greek and Egyptian, outlined trade agreements that functioned like ancient tariffs, with taxes calculated down to the drachma. Temples to Ammon stood beside shrines to Heracles, the city's namesake, their altars bearing offerings from Crete, Cyprus, and beyond. Even the harbor's layout was revolutionary. Sonar mapping shows a labyrinth of canals and artificial islands designed to guide ships safely through the Nile Delta's shifting sands, a maritime GPS carved in stone. Then there's the mystery of its fall. Unlike Pompeii, frozen in a single catastrophic moment, Heraclion's doom was slow and insidious. Core samples tell the story. Gradual sinking, compounded by rising sea levels and earthquakes, until one day around the 8th century, the last wooden pilings slipped beneath the waves. Yet the most haunting detail isn't how it fell, it's how long the city fought back. Archaeologists found evidence of makeshift repairs to crumbling quays, houses raised on stilts as waters rose, even attempts to reinforce temples with salvaged ship timbers. These weren't people fleeing, they were a civilization refusing to let go of their place in the world. Now, as conservators painstakingly desalinate statues and decipher waterlogged papyri, Heraclion's legacy comes into focus. This was more than a port, it was a living experiment in cultural fusion, where Egyptian gods acquired Greek names and Athenian philosophers studied in Nilotic libraries. Its ruins challenge our neat divisions between East and West, proving that globalization isn't a modern invention, but an ancient rhythm written in stone and salt water. The sands may have reclaimed Heraclean streets, but its lesson surfaces clearer than ever. Civilizations don't flourish in isolation. They thrive where the tides of trade and trust converge, leaving echoes that outlast even the sea. Perched on the razorback ridges of Ethiopia's Amhara highlands, the fortress city of Gondar doesn't just occupy the landscape, it defies it. Towering stone walls, some 16 feet thick, cling to cliffs so sheer that clouds often shroud their foundations. This wasn't just a royal retreat, it was a statement carved in basalt. Built in the 17th century by Emperor Fasilides, Gondar and its sister fortresses like Deba Burhan Selassie became the nerve center of a kingdom that outmaneuvered invaders for centuries, not through brute force alone, but by weaponizing altitude itself. Step inside the compound known as Fasal Gebi, and you're walking through a tactical masterclass. Circular turrets designed to deflect cannon fire stand beside slender towers that doubled as lookouts, their panoramic views stretching to the horizon. The architecture is a fusion of Ethiopian tradition and borrowed ingenuity. Portuguese masons, stranded after failed alliances against Ottoman expansion, contributed arched windows and multi-story construction techniques. Yet the soul of these structures is unmistakably African. Vivid frescoes in the castle chapels depict biblical scenes with brown-skinned saints, while hidden tunnels snake beneath courtyards, allowing defenders to vanish and reappear like ghosts. The real genius of Gondar's isolation wasn't just defense, it was psychology. European colonizers, armed with gunpowder and arrogance, found their ambitions dashed against these mountains. When Italian forces attempted to seize the highlands in the 19th century, they underestimated the logistical nightmare. Narrow passes forced their columns into single file, where Ethiopian sharpshooters picked them off from concealed ridges. Supply lines stretched thin across oxygen-thin altitudes, while local fighters, acclimated to the thin air, moved swiftly through hidden goat trails. Gondar's very location turned conventional warfare on its head. Here, the high ground wasn't an advantage, it was the only rule that mattered. But these fortresses weren't just strongholds, they were living archives. The castle libraries safeguarded illuminated manuscripts like the Kebra Nagast, a sacred text tracing Ethiopia's royal lineage to King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. This wasn't mere genealogy, it was geopolitical armor. By anchoring their sovereignty in antiquity, Ethiopian rulers framed resistance as divine mandate. Even during the brief Italian occupation in the 1930s, Gondar's underground scriptoriums preserved these documents, ensuring that when the invaders left, the stories remained. Today, the silence of these battlements speaks volumes. Unlike European castles restored for tourists, Gondar's walls still bear pockmarks from mortar fire, their unvarnished scars testifying to resilience. The surrounding hills, dotted with the ruins of lesser fortresses, form a constellation of defiance, each one a chapter in Africa's unbroken narrative of self-determination. From this vantage, you can almost hear the echoes of a truth colonial maps never acknowledged. That remoteness isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the ultimate strategy. Now, let's descend from these skyborne citadels to our final ruin, one that proves isolation isn't always chosen. Beneath the waves of Japan's Ryukyu Islands, the sunken walls of Yonaguni whisper of a civilization swallowed by the sea, and the ghosts of migrations we're still learning to trace. On the wind-scorched shores of Greenland's fjords, where icebergs crack like gunshots in the silence, stand the ghostly outlines of a civilization that refused to surrender until it did. The Norse settlements of the eastern and western fjords weren't just outposts, they were full-fledged medieval communities, complete with stone churches, dairy farms, and even bishops appointed by the Pope. For 4 centuries, these Viking descendants carved out a life in a land where winter darkness lasted months and grass grew slower than glacial ice. Then, around the year 1450, every settlement went silent. The ruins they left behind, crumbling walls half buried in permafrost, rusted iron tools abandoned mid-task, tell a story not of sudden catastrophe, but of a slow, grinding unraveling that holds unsettling lessons for our own era of climate upheaval. The mystery isn't why they came. Greenland's early medieval period was warm enough to justify Eric the Red's infamous sales pitch, but why they clung so stubbornly to a way of life that stopped making sense. Excavations at sites like Hvalsey Church reveal a society trapped in tradition. Despite dwindling resources, the Norse kept building in the same style as their Scandinavian ancestors. Longhouses with turf roofs that collapsed under heavier snowfall, barns sized for cattle that could no longer survive the cooling climate. Meanwhile, Inuit neighbors thrived just miles away, adapting with flexible hunting strategies and skin tents that could be moved seasonally. The Norse didn't starve because Greenland couldn't support life. They starved because they refused to live differently. Climate proxies from ice cores paint a chilling picture. The period from 1300 to 1450, coinciding exactly with the settlement's decline, saw temperatures plummet during the Little Ice Age. Sea ice expanded, cutting off trade routes to Europe, while shorter growing seasons left grain stores empty. But here's what's haunting: this wasn't an instant disaster. Tree ring data shows decades of worsening conditions, years when the Norse could have shifted to seal hunting like the Inuit, or abandoned their failing farms for better ground. Instead, they doubled down even as their world shrank. A single sheep bone found at Gardar Cathedral tells the tragic archetypes from an animal that lived years after trade ceased, a desperate attempt to maintain European identity in a landscape demanding reinvention. The real lesson of Greenland's Norse isn't about climate change alone, it's about cultural rigidity. These weren't primitive people, they were innovators who'd crossed oceans in open boats. Yet their very strengths became liabilities. Church records show they continued importing luxury goods like stained glass long after they'd stopped receiving shipments of iron and grain. They buried their dead in Christian cemeteries even as malnutrition left skeletons stunted. In the end, the ruins whisper of a people who prioritized survival as they knew it over survival itself. Now, as modern Greenland's thawing permafrost exposes more Norse artifacts, the parallels are impossible to ignore. Like us, they faced a shifting world that rewarded flexibility and punished dogma. Their empty farms stand as monuments to a universal truth. Migration isn't just about moving, it's about adapting. And sometimes the most dangerous border isn't geographic, but the one between what we are and what we must become to endure. These ruins don't just sit quietly in the landscape, they shout down centuries of assumptions about who explored where and when. Take the Polynesians, for instance. While European maps once labeled the Pacific as a void, the spread of sweet potatoes, a crop native to the Americas found in prehistoric Polynesian sites, tells a different story. How did a tuber from Peru end up on islands like Easter Island centuries before Columbus? The answer is written in the stars. Polynesian navigators didn't just hug coastlines. They crossed thousands of miles of open ocean using nothing but wave patterns, bird flights, and celestial maps carved into memory. Their ruins, from New Zealand's Maori fortifications to Hawaii's Heiau temples, prove they didn't stumble upon these islands. They sought them, guided by knowledge we're only beginning to decode. Then there's the Arctic's greatest surprise. The Vikings didn't stop at Greenland. The discovery of Norse artifacts on Canada's Baffin Island, far beyond their known settlements, suggests they probed deeper into North America than the fleeting Vinland colony at Elant's Ork's Meadows. A single yarn spinning tool found there, identical to those in Iceland, hints at women making the journey too, not just raiding parties but families. This flips the script on the lone Viking explorer myth. These weren't temporary camps. They were waypoints in a network stretching across latitudes Europeans wouldn't officially discover for another 500 years. What unites these journeys isn't just bravery, it's necessity. The ruins of Nan Madol, a city built on coral reefs in Micronesia, reveal a society that turned scarcity into innovation. With no arable land, they hauled basalt logs from volcanoes miles away, stacking them into artificial islands. Similarly, the cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde weren't just defensive. Tree ring data shows they were built during a mega drought, suggesting the ancestral pueblones moved up because the valleys could no longer sustain them. Migration wasn't some heroic choice, it was survival, driven by the same forces displacing communities today: climate shifts, resource competition, and the search for stability. The most persistent myth these ruins dismantle: that exploration was a European monopoly. Great Zimbabwe's Chinese porcelain and Persian glass place Africa at the center of medieval trade routes, while the Olmec colossal heads, carved from stone sourced hundreds of miles away, prove Mesoamerica had long-distance networks before the wheel reached the continent. Even Antarctica's disputed ruins, if verified, suggest indigenous Australians or Polynesians may have glimpsed the frozen continent long before Bellingshausen's discovery in 1820. These sites share a silent lesson. Migration isn't linear, and it's rarely one-way. The Greenland Norse vanished, but their Inuit neighbors adapted and thrived. The Maya abandoned Tikal's pyramids only to resurge in northern Yucatan. Ruins aren't in points, they're punctuation marks in stories of resilience. When we look at them, we're not seeing dead ends. We're seeing detours, experiments, and sometimes warnings. The next time someone calls a place untouched, remember, the stones beneath our feet are rarely as silent as they seem. These silent stones scattered across deserts, jungles, and ocean floors aren't just relics, they're revolutionaries. Every crumbled wall and weathered inscription chips away at the old maps we've drawn in our minds, the ones with neat borders and orderly timelines. Think about it. The Vikings weren't supposed to have outposts in the Arctic, yet their rusted nails dot Svalbard's permafrost. The Polynesians couldn't possibly have reached South America, yet sweet potatoes from Peru sprouted in their island gardens centuries before Columbus. These aren't anomalies, they're proof that human curiosity has always outpaced the stories we tell about it. What's extraordinary isn't just how far our ancestors journeyed, but why. The ruins of Tayuna, hidden in Colombia's mountains, reveal a people who traded seashells and gemstones across impossible terrain. The sunken city of Heraclion, once a bustling Greco-Egyptian port, shows us that globalization isn't a modern invention, it's an ancient rhythm. These places weren't isolated, they were nodes in vast, invisible networks connected by routes we're still struggling to trace. The real myth isn't that these cultures were separate, it's that they ever could be. And then there's the resilience. The cliffside monasteries of Meteora didn't just defy gravity, they defied empires, their monks hoisting supplies up sheer rock faces to preserve their faith. The Hittites of Hatusa didn't just abandon their capital, they buried their gods face down, a ritual goodbye that speaks volumes about their refusal to let their legacy disappear. Even in collapse, these cultures left behind blueprints for survival. The Greenland Norse might have vanished, but their story warns us about the cost of clinging to the familiar when the world demands adaptation. So what's the thread tying these 25 ruins together? It's not just movement, it's reinvention. The Maya didn't vanish when they left El Mirador, they built anew elsewhere. The Tarona people who fled Tayuna didn't stop being Tarona, they carried their traditions into the jungle. Migration isn't about leaving things behind, it's about carrying them forward in ways we can't always see. That's the gift these ruins offer us, a chance to trade fixed histories for living questions. Every time a diver surfaces with an artifact from Yonaguni or a LiDAR scan reveals a lost Amazonian city, we're reminded that the past isn't settled. It's a conversation, one where new voices keep joining in. So tell me in the comments which of these stories reshaped your view of human history. Was it the Arctic Vikings, the Polynesian navigators, or the desert traders of Palmyra? Because the truth is, this isn't just their story, it's ours, and the next chapter is still